Let's talk about my relationship with money after working on Wall Street. I filmed a video last night for a YouTube company talking about Wall Street, and whenever I talk about Wall Street in depth with other people, it always calls into question my personal relationship with money, which I think is a very interesting topic. But before I get into that, I want to mention that yes, I do know that my eyelashes look janky on the left side. I don't need you to tell me. I'm getting them fixed. I'm getting a new place. But I think this is a really good highlight of what I'm about to talk about, which is that sometimes I think I can be frugal to a fault that it later comes back around to bite me in the butt, or I end up spending more money. And I think a lot of that mindset is built because of the way that I worked on Wall Street and the people that I worked with, which I think has given me this really warped perception of how money works in the real world. So today I'm going to give you 5 reasons or 5 ways that Wall Street really ruined my personal relationship with money. Number 1 is that while working on Wall Street, I worked with money in a way that I probably will never see. Like, I worked with millionaires and billionaires, and I was talking about transactions in a size that probably won't ever be in my personal reality. And I think that's totally fine, but that leads me into my first big point, which is that working on Wall Street can treat money like it's a game. When you work with numbers that are that big, they can stop feeling really real. Like, the first time I saw someone's account with $1 billion in it, I was like, that's just like ridiculous, I guess. Like, that's not like a real amount of money. You can't really feasibly spend $1 billion in someone's lifetime. And when you think about that level of wealth and stuff like that, and like working in those accounts, it really just has to become like numerical transactions. And for me, it divorced my concept of money from reality in a way that sometimes I'm not comfortable with. Like, sometimes I look at my accounts and I'm like, ugh, like that's a very small number. But in reality, like that number could sustain me for a good amount of time and is kind of the capital that I need in my moment in life. But in working with these transactions that were so large and these people who had so much money, my own perception of wealth and capital and what these numbers mean has become really warped. I don't know if you guys have seen that clip. I reference it a lot where Lucille is like, it's one banana. How much could it cost? $10? But like, that's a reality for people. I was talking to a friend who had a client ask her to go buy her marshmallow equipment, like graham crackers and marshmallows and chocolate, to make marshmallows at home with her kids when she like went to go grab a check. And the person was like, how much do you think it'll cost from the bodega down the street? Like, is $40 gonna be enough? My friend was like, it was just such an interesting moment where like these people have so much wealth that the money no longer means the same thing to them. And that's something I've grappled with a lot since leaving private wealth, since stopping trading as actively, and since I've stopped talking to these like ultra high net worth clients on a daily basis. But I think working in some of these spaces can tend to lead you to think about money less as like what it actually is and more as like, oh, it's just a number. And I don't think that's always a good mindset. On that point, number 2 is that while working on Wall Street, I became really, really numbers focused. I'm someone who sees capital and having access to capital as something important in life, which is why I talk about finance on the internet. Like, I want these systems to be more accessible to more people. But in working in some of these spaces, I became really, really, really focused on the numbers in my accounts and the numbers in general, in a way that I don't think is important. I think having money is important for a lot of reasons and for a lot of people. And it would be really, really, really privileged of me to sit here and be like, oh, like money's not important, because it is. And I know that having capital goes a long way in this world. But I also think that numbers can be really arbitrary. I do think benchmarking is important. I think it's important to think about where you land relative to others. But I also think that numbers for the sake of numbers is weird. And a personal example of this is I was really, really focused on saving up $100,000 before I hit 25. And I'm not unhappy that I did that. I'm actually really grateful I did. I think it's given me more financial freedom to make choices that I'm excited about. Like, I'm very grateful that I saved like that. But $100,000 is this random arbitrary number, and I wouldn't have been worse off for saving $97,000. I just think that working on Wall Street can lead you to quantify things that don't always need to be quantified. Like, you can save money and be responsible and invest and do all of those things and not check your accounts daily to make sure they're hitting like the specific number that you want to hit. if that makes any sense. And I think this also plays a lot into my third one, which is that I think a lot of people on Wall Street are very extreme. Obviously, being extreme isn't a bad thing, and I do think that you hear a lot more from the particular outliers, but I do think that working on Wall Street kind of led me and a lot of people around me to have very like all or nothing mindsets regarding money. I think people in some of these spaces can get really frugal or can really go the other extreme of like, I don't save any money. And I'll give some examples of this. I used to work next to a guy who never bought food while working at Goldman Sachs, like made six figures right out of school and never bought food. So I worked at Goldman Sachs. My desk got free dinner at 8 p.m. and then every 4 hours you get another like allowance. So you get $25 at 8 p.m., you get $25 at midnight, whatever, all through the night if you're like spending the evening in the office. But he never bought food in New York. Instead, on Monday at 8 p.m., he would go across the street to Whole Foods and buy a loaf of bread, a thing of bologna, and some cheese, and like maybe some snacks, and that's what he would eat for the week. He would eat one sandwich a day in a little Tupperware and just like make this little sandwich, and that's the only thing he would ever eat. He used to shit on me a lot for like buying breakfast or like buying lunch if I was in a hurry. I used to have to go like grab him Shake Shack mustard packets because he wouldn't buy mustard. Like, these experiences are so weird and understandable for certain people, but like at that point, you're affecting the people's lives around you. Like, you're refusing to go to bars, you're refusing to hang out with your friends, you're refusing to make connections in a way that I just don't think is productive to like living a wholesome life. And that's a really, really benign example, but this person also refused to get health insurance when he was kicked off his parents' insurance because he didn't want to pay for it. And that's so weird to me. Like, if you are privileged enough to have the money and have a job that provides you with insurance, like, you're doing so much better than so many people. Utilize the opportunities you've been given, even if it means that you sacrifice like a little bit of your savings rate. Like, it's gonna be okay. And I'm not trying to shame people who do these things, but I feel like I had a lot of friends or peers or coworkers who would complain about their like level of poverty. And I'm like, yeah, but you're not poor. Like, you could spend that money if you chose to, and you're choosing not to. And if you don't want to spend it, that's fine, but I used to work with someone who had tens of millions of dollars and would refuse to buy SPY over VOO because of the expense ratio, and then would complain when like there weren't enough options trades on VOO, despite that being like a very well-known thing about these individual indexes. And on that level, I'm like, I don't understand why you're like cutting corners here to make yourself angry down the line. And that's something that I think I adopted. I lived in New Jersey because I knew it was cheaper, despite the fact that the commute like drove me batty. And while I don't think that operating like that is like inherently wrong or evil, I think when you operate like that, you do miss out on A, like fun experiences, B, like times with other people who want to spend money in some capacity, and C, I think you miss out on a lot of moments to be charitable with the extra income that you have been given. On the other side though, in terms of all or nothing thinking, I also had coworkers who were really comfortable just spending tons and tons of money, or like money they didn't have. And I think that's also harmful. I remember talking to someone who was a second year analyst and being like, oh yeah, like I'm upping my 401k from 10 to 15% this year. And she was like, oh, that's so weird. Like, I haven't saved a single cent while I've worked here. And I was like, you've probably made six figures for multiple years and you don't have a single dollar in savings. And she was like, nope, like I like spend it. And I know people who like go into debt to live that lifestyle. And that like gap of people on Wall Street always made me really uncomfortable. And I think you saw the ladder of like spending every cent you have more with ultra high net worth clients. I think a lot of advisors have to have chats with clients, like with super, super wealthy, high net worth clients, being like, hey, you're spending too much money, you're not gonna have anything left. And I think that feeds into my next one, which is that I think Wall Street really breeds this keeping up with the Joneses type attitude. I mentioned that I'm a pretty frugal person. I'm pretty frugal inherently, except for like a couple key areas. And notably, one of those areas is not fashion. I have a couple suits that I wear over and over. While I was on Wall Street, I really just kind of wore pantsuits and heels. I had a couple pairs of like the same heels that I bought because I like them and they're comfortable. I'm also neurodivergent, so I have like an issue with seams. I have a lot of like comfort issues with clothing that I think about a lot. I used to get a lot of because I wear like low-end suits. I'm not fashion inclined, so I can't really tell the difference between suits, so maybe I'm just really weird in this regard. But like, I bought a couple suits from Ann Taylor. Suits are expensive, and I just like wore the same ones. I'm wearing a suit, I'm in heels, I'm wearing makeup. Like, I don't know what else you really want from me here. And the answer is that people want to see you in like high-end clothing. The fact that people buy like $300 ties will forever be mind-boggling to me. But a lot of people really like them. I just think that that attitude is like pushed onto others. I think you see people spending really, really big amounts of money very publicly. So like when someone on the desk bought a house, like everybody saw the exact price of the house. Like a lot of advisors would have us trade their accounts, so you could see exactly how much money they had. And again, it's not something that I think is inherently bad, but it is something I think that has had implications on how I think about things. And it's hard to work in a space where you feel behind or othered. And I think I got a lot of critiques on like what I wore that I didn't always think were appropriate, because I was doing above the bare minimum. Like there were kids on my desk wearing jeans and I was in a suit. I think this is a place where my brain just kind of hits a wall. Like I don't get it. And I think there are places where this is more harmful. I think you see it in like the apartments people live in that are out of their means sometimes. I think you see this with like engagement rings. I remember someone telling me like that they would be devastated if their engagement ring wasn't worth $50,000. And I was like, I would take a ring pop. And I think this like competitive, money hungry mindset isn't one that I personally want to have as an adult. And I've had to spend a lot of time kind of undoing the concept that to be like a full professional adult, you have to be spending a lot of money. But I like do stand firmly by the fact that I could do all of that very well in an Ann Taylor suit. I love you, Ann Taylor. Please sponsor me. And the last point is that I think working on Wall Street frames money as the primary currency in life. And I just strongly disagree with that. I think money grants a level of privilege. I think money is important. But I also think there are things in life that are more important than that, like surrounding yourself with good people and being happy and having hobbies. Like I think for me, a lot of those things are enabled by money, but money is less important than them, period. I just feel like I heard a lot of really sad stories about people who weren't doing things that brought them joy or like spending time with the people that they loved because they were so focused on getting a bigger bonus or making more money or being able to spend more money. And there's another advisor I was speaking to, right, kind of as COVID was picking up, and he was like, yeah, you know, not having to come to the office means that I'm eating dinner with my family for the first time in 10 years. A lot of people don't place value on those moments, but those are things that I don't think you can quantify with money. Like, I don't think earning $50,000 more at your end of your bonus, like, makes your kids feel any better that they didn't get to spend any time with you. And that's really sad to me. I think I sacrificed a lot of myself as a person to work on Wall Street. And for me, leaving Wall Street was exchanging money, exchanging, you know, potential income for happiness and for freedom and for the ability to do things that I love. In working on Wall Street, I wasn't able to put out content on social media the way I wanted to. I wasn't able to talk about some of the issues I cared about. I didn't have time to do some of my hobbies. And that's not something I ever really want to give up again. I just think that as I've sat here alone in COVID, getting to spend, you know, more time on social media in ways that I enjoy and spend time on FaceTime with people that I love, that driving your life solely based on money and the next influx of money and making more money isn't something that I'm comfortable with, but is something that I'm having to currently unlearn after working on Wall Street. That ended up kind of sad. But I'm also really grateful. I'm really grateful that I have personal finance skills. I'm really grateful that I was able to spend this time in an industry and learn that this stuff wasn't for me. I'm really grateful that I can talk about money in this educated way, and I'm grateful for all the skills that I built. Like, I spend a lot of time also being very grateful. But these are pretty big pitfalls that I think have created these spots of cognitive dissonance that I'm actively having to work to undo, and I don't appreciate that. But with that, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Please feel free to leave any questions or comments. I love chatting with you guys. I think getting to make cool social media content is one of my favorite things about leaving Wall Street, is like getting to talk about this stuff publicly. But feel free to share with anyone you think this might be helpful for. Like, subscribe, comment. Feel free to leave a rude comment if you didn't like this video, and I'll try to come up with something funny and snarky in response. Other than that, thank you guys so much. See you next week.